Investing in the stock market or directly in various companies was a dream that very few people had dared to realize in the past. Either because they believed that doing so required inordinate amounts of capital, or because they did not have the knowledge to do so, but these barriers have remained in place in recent years. All this is due to certain financial strategies, which have made it possible to fragment shares of large companies. Thanks to these fragments, not only do you have the opportunity to make profits, even if they are lower than those made by other partners in the company, but we can also learn from moves that investments like Ray Dalio have made. However, there are certain questions that cannot remain anonymous. How did Ray Dalio become the billionaire he is today? What were the sectors in which he placed his trust? And most importantly, in which companies has he invested his capital? In this video, we will answer your questions and tell you a characteristic detail of these companies and how you can invest in them without having to look them up one by one. Although there are some people who surely prefer to invest individually in all these options, we will introduce you to one of these dividend earning strategies, which has already yielded several favorable results for some people. If you want to know more about it and these companies, then we encourage you to subscribe to the channel. Here, we talk about finance, investments, and other topics that have to do with the global economy. So, if you are interested, press the red bell next to the title and join the group. That said, let's take a look at some of Ray Dalio's concerns. Known as one of the world's most followed entrepreneurs and investors, Ray Dalio is one of the founders and current co-head of the investment division of Bridgewater Associates. Thanks to the knowledge he gained from his MBA, the entrepreneur decided to set up the company from his flat. That was several years ago, and today he is considered one of the most stable millionaires in the world. All this thanks to two things that the man changed and perfected over time. The first is his investment strategy, which focuses mainly on investing in long-term trades. Those amounts are high, but this is due to the incredible knowledge he possesses and his panoramic view of global macroeconomics. Secondly, we can find an investment strategy that the entrepreneur himself introduces and follows, regardless of global economic conditions. This system is known as the all-weather portfolio, and a lot of work was done on the concepts of risk and capital, all in order to establish a permanent and stable investment portfolio, regardless of the weather. The strategy was designed for a future in which we do not know what will happen to the stock markets, and focuses on four themes that are of utmost importance to Ray: growth, recession, inflation, and deflation. For him, it is important to determine the amounts according to these four asset classes, and at the same time, to take into account the risk parity in each of them with the same split. In this way, the investor has been able to preserve most of his fortune, even in situations that have hit most of his fellow entrepreneurs hard. All thanks to a portfolio that is able to behave with stability and fluidity, even in times of market downturns. And speaking of downturns, thanks to the 13F report filled with the Securities and Exchange Commission, many entrepreneurs, including Dalio, have been informed of the value of the hedge fund portfolio. Because of the figures presented in that document, the investment guru has expressed concern about the clear impact the stock market is taking, due to inflation and internal and external conflicts in certain countries. From his point of view, these are some of the strongest factors that are causing the global economic problem. And that is why, since the first quarter of the year, he has decided to invest in sectors such as healthcare, financials, commodities, communications, and more. While we are aware that Ray can afford to open new investments whenever he wants, not all of us have the same opportunities to do so. That is why, in this block, we will talk a little more about a certain investment tool that has proved to be a success to emulate the steps of millionaires like Ray Dalio. For those who don't know, ETFs, or exchange-traded funds, are investment instruments based on the principle of collectivity to group together a series of companies in a single investment and share fund. One of their main advantages is that portfolios of liabilities can be diversified without the need to buy individual parts of a company. In addition, this type of investment has the liquidity to buy or sell assets on the stock exchange, even if they have been obtained through an ETF. In general, this has become one of the most researched and executed investment methods in recent months. And that is why, in the following block, we will tell you the right companies and ETFs where you can invest to enter the Ray Dalio all-weather portfolio system. Of course, before we continue with the topic, we would like to thank you for your attention and for having reached the halfway point of the video. Your comments and visits are always welcome, but if you want to help the channel even more, just leave your like within each published content. This helps YouTube discover our videos and recommend them to more users on the platform. If that thumbs up is ready, let's move on. Although some people want to invest in 1 or 2 companies to get started and get used to the activity, they don't know which companies they can start with and which ones will bring them the most profit in the long run. That's why we decided to bring you the list that Investing Pro Plus published about some of the companies that Ray Dalio has his investments in. Remember, although it may be attractive to enter a percentage of investment in all of them, the best thing to do, especially if you are just starting out, is to choose 2 or 3 and start with them. When you get used to holding those investments, you can then increase your portfolio with other stocks or an exchange-traded fund. Don't forget that if you want to have an all-weather portfolio, you have to think of these investments as long-term products. Now, let's look at some of the companies in which Ray Dalio has invested his assets. Vanguard FTSE Emerging Markets Indexed Fund Shares ETF, NYSE Index VWO, Procter & Gamble, NYSE Index PG. That's right, the company that sells consumer products and goods is one of the companies in which Dalio has invested the most. iShares Core MSCI Emerging Markets ETF, NYSE Index IEMG. iShares MCSI Emerging Markets ETF, NYSE Index EEM. As you can see, some ETFs were added to the list, as these funds hold several businesses where Ray has his money. SPDR S&P 500, NYSE Index SPY. Chinese tech giant Alibaba, NYSE Index BABA. Today, Alibaba is known as one of the most successful conglomerates with the most subsidiaries in existence, so it's a good place to start investing. Johnson & Johnson, NYSE Index JNJ. Coca-Cola, NYSE Index KO. The cola giant also makes the list, which automatically tells us that there are still plenty of people who enjoy the beverage while they eat. PepsiCo, Nasdaq Index PEP. Costco Wholesale, Nasdaq Index COST. One of the world's largest retail chains makes the list and stands out completely. It's the only such brand on Dalio's list of top investments. Although we have already seen some of the most relevant companies in which Ray Dalio has invested his capital, there are still the rankings that investors like to include in their portfolios. As there are several blocks that can be found in this section, we will focus only on the most successful companies in each of these sections. We start with the large caps, and here we can see that the crowning glory is Berkshire Hathaway, NYSE Index BRKA, followed by Johnson & Johnson. Another company that stands out in appearance is Visa, NYSE Index V. Moving on to those companies that have experienced notable growth in recent months, we have Pfizer, NYSE Index PFE, and Airbnb. If you are looking for companies and stocks that are often undervalued by other investors, but have returned a certain brand of value, you might consider investigating the growth of Alibaba Group and General Electric, NYSE Index GE. Scrolling through the stocks with a low PE ratio, we can see that the largest on the list is Ford Motor, NYSE Index F, followed by prepared foods company Tyson Foods, NYSE Index TSN, and giants Dow Inc. and Intel, Nasdaq Index INTC. Finally, if we look at stocks that are experiencing high dividend growth, we can see that companies like AT&T, International Business Machines, NYSE Index IBM, and Kraft Heinz, Nasdaq Index KHC, are some of the best performers in these months. These are some of the companies that we can see in Ray Dalio's portfolio, in terms of investments, and although not all of them are doing as well as they would like, we must bear in mind that if we are looking for a similar objective to the billionaire's all-weather portfolio, we have to overcome doubts. We must build and hold these stocks that we have already achieved, as long as there is still a positive outlook, albeit in the future. And with this commentary, we end today's video. Although Ray Dalio is not as rich as other tycoons we have seen on the channel, we must recognize that his investment portfolio is one of the most varied and solid you can find. Given that the billionaire values risk allocation, some of his moves are possibly bold, but in several cases, they have given him the results he expected and more. Looking at the way he invests, we ask, would you dare to move your cash into equities as he does? Would you take those risks, even though you know you stand to lose considerable amounts? And into which sectors would you inject your assets? Leave your answers to the questions in the comments box, and don't forget to support us with your suggestions for new material to upload to the channel. We thank you for sticking around until the end of the video, and we extend the invitation to subscribe and leave your like. See you next time!